We'll start with an easy one, an obvious one, is what makes you, not your opponent, the best candidate to run against Roger Williams in March?
Starting with me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Julie Oliver. It is great to be here. Thank you for having us. The reason why I should be the candidate running against Roger Williams is not only the work that we did in 2018, which covered about 50,000 miles through 13 counties. We organized deep and wide, but it's also the story that is my very lived experience. The connections I've made with thousands of people across this district. There are so many women that I've met, and to a lesser extent men, but many, many women who share a very similar story to mine. I grew up in poverty. At the age of 17, I had dropped out of high school, ran away from home. When I got pregnant, it was a big kick in the pants to go back home, and because we didn't have insurance in my family, I was a Medicaid mom until my Medicaid benefits ran out on my 18th birthday. My daughter was born May 24th. I'm a July 25th baby. So my Medicaid benefits ran out at the 60-day mark. And then at that point, we were uninsured for the next 6 years. I was able to, with the help of the community and the generous or more generous government programs that were available in the early 90s, go on to college completely debt-free. And then what brought me here to Austin was law school 20 some odd years ago in 1995. And so with that, my lived experience is something that so many people identify with. And I see myself in so many of the people that I've met. But then beyond that, having the opportunity to be able to go to school, and I know you all can visualize what it would have been like for a 17-year-old pregnant woman who wasn't able to go back to school, what her life could have been like. And generational poverty probably would have started developing within our family. Out of law school, I went into the tax world. I decided I wanted to be a tax attorney in law school. I love tax policy, y'all. It is where I find my heart sings with tax policy. And 5 years into that career, I got pulled over to the largest hospital operator in America, HCA, doing business through St. David's here in Austin. And I will tell you, if you want to change a system, if you want to break a system, you better know that system. And I know healthcare finance like the back of my hand. And if you're talking about organizing, not only organizing through the 13 counties, swinging what should have been Roger Williams' safe seat 12 percentage points, I know how to organize at a local level. I sit on the board of Central Health, and I am so proud of my accomplishments. In fact, I don't think the people who appointed me at the city of Austin knew how committed to transparency and accountability I would be. But I can tell you we've not funded any galas. Since I've been there. We have committed to many health care facilities in the far eastern crescent of Travis County. People who have been asking for healthcare facilities ever since Central Health was formed. And nobody ever did anything about it until I got on that board and we started championing for the folks who live there. And then when Sendero was on the chopping block a little over a year ago, I was one of 3 board members who voted to save it. Central Health killed it, but then I organized and rallied hundreds of people to show up at Travis County Commissioner's Court. And Travis County Commissioner's Court, who was set, a Democratic body, was set to kill Sendero. They managed to push it back on Central Health, said, you need to revisit your budget. We revisited the budget. I whipped the votes on the board. We saved Sendero, and 14,000 people in Travis County have health care because of it. And then I'm proud most recently of organizing to get a $15 minimum wage, which we will be voting on as a board at the end of this month. So if any of y'all would like to come, I think that's a very big accomplishment. So it's not just, lip service for me. This is what I do. I don't know how else to be because my lived experience has informed everything that I do, and it has informed going back to Congressional District 25 for this cycle. And so I can beat Roger Williams, and I will beat Roger Williams in November of 2020. Thank you.
Sure. And so you can have about 5 minutes, Heidi. I forgot to say that we wanted to limit responses to about 3 minutes, but we'll do that after this one.
Sure. You got it.
Thank you. I really appreciate the space. I really appreciate sharing the space with Julie time and time again as well. My name is Heidi Sloane. I entered this race from a background of community organizing. And I'll get to that sort of the long way around. I'm a native Texan as well. I grew up near Dallas and in a working class family. My dad drove a truck, delivered pizzas, the story, the regular family story. And my mom mostly struggled with mental health care needs that weren't met. And so my exit from that family, from that home on scholarships to Baylor led me to always be drawn to the margins, to folks who also always struggled, to folks who never quite found that care that they needed. I ended up here in Austin working at Cassis Elementary for about 6 years, starting as a daycare worker for teachers' kids, and then moved into, with those children, the PPCD classroom, which is a preschool program for children with disabilities, which was a beautiful space, especially at a really well-resourced school like Cassis. But not all of the children in that classroom were coming from the background of being well-resourced. And for me, it was an opportunity to see what that space could look like when centering universal needs was the driving force, and how creatively those children could meet each other in their needs and their experiences, and for me to follow along and really enjoy that. But I got a wild hair, and I decided I wanted to become a farmer. So I started looking for work in that world, and I was very fortunate to find Mobile Loaves and Fishes, where I have been for the last seven years on staff, volunteered for a while before that, as the farmer out at Mobile Loaves and Fishes Community First Village. And that is a permanent supportive housing community for folks who have been chronically homeless. And that the HUD definition is a year on the street, but for many of my friends, it's 10 or 20 or 30 years. In those 7.5 years, I have made and lost a lot of relationships to people not so dissimilar to myself, to my mom, to folks whose mental health needs never did get met, to folks who the healthcare system in general disregarded, didn't value, to the carceral system and the cycle that it creates. And in 2016, like a lot of people, really feeling the dynamics of a broken system, I got really tired of putting Band-Aids on. And I love the work that I do, and I continue to do that work, but I wanted to get at root causes. So I turned to community organizing. And for me, that has looked like building relationships and coalition to win strategic campaigns here in Austin and around the state of Texas. I was very fortunate, and one of my earliest campaign experiences was the Paid Sick Days campaign, which initiated here and then went to Dallas and San Antonio as well. Really realizing during the course of that experience what it is that we were trying to do, which is center the common experiences of working class people and bring them into their own power, making sure that their voices led, our voices led. Knocking on doors in North Austin, in Jimmy Flanagan's district, to encourage his vote, and having Trump supporters tell me I didn't know there were people in the world without paid sick time. Knocking or going to visit Burger King or Whataburger here in central Austin and having workers tell me I didn't know there was such a thing as paid sick time. And just ran with it, just totally got hooked on the coalition building, on the power mapping, on the organizing and bringing new leaders into the work. Worked on the Medicare for All campaign to encourage Representative Lloyd Doggett to sign on to H.R. 1384, which after 19 months he did. Worked on the homeless decriminalization campaign here in Austin, which was certainly controversial, but I can tell you, where neighborhood meetings have been explicit about their frustration at not being able to directly talk to council, I have tried to be there, even for the hard ones, even for the really nasty ones, because I deeply believe that we have more in common than we do differently. And that is why I've entered this campaign, because looking at this district, I know that for any one of us to win, it is going to take not just knocking doors, it is going to take turning people into organizers, into leaders, into the kind of inspirers of hope that it will take to change our lives. So we have the 15-minute conversations. We go and ask people first, tell me what you think is wrong, what you think should happen, what your experience has been, and let me follow you. Let me show up for you. Let me show up in the ways that we have during this campaign for many issues, from a Green New Deal and an Austin Energy Initiative to pursue that, from organizing in Hayes County for Cite and Release, from looking into and supporting Education Austin as determinations are being made about our school closures. When we show up for people, they show up for us. And that's the kind of enduring community we are building with this campaign. And that's the kind of enduring community that it's going to take to get Roger Williams out and keep people like him from taking back the leadership over, but not with, the working class of District 25.
Thank you. What do you think, Julie, is the most important piece of legislation that Congress should pass? And again, if we keep the responses to about 2 minutes, that way we can cover more ground. So 2 minutes, please.
I will say Heidi and I get asked this a lot, and I think because we are women, we can multitask. So there are several pieces of legislation that are incredibly important. Obviously, Medicare for all, and ensuring that every one of our 5 million Texans who do not have health care currently have access to high quality health care, can afford to see a doctor, can afford their prescription medications. Ensuring that we have a planet that is livable in 20 years by moving towards Green New Deal legislation and policies. But I think that one of the things that I noticed, probably naively, when I entered the race in 2017, it was healthcare for me. And I kept thinking, if I just explain how healthcare is financed in America, how inefficient it is, how terrible the outcomes are, people will listen and will be like, aha, yes, we need universal healthcare. What I quickly learned is that there's a darker influence, and that is the influence of big money in politics. And I would love to see us address big money in politics, because it is going to be very challenging to push forward legislation that is robust and transformative, like Medicare for All, Green New Deal, if we don't address the cancer of big money in politics. And I would like to push forth or propose legislation in the tax world that is called Tax the PACs. So taxing any corporate PAC onerously, so you discourage the initial investment to begin with, but PACs are tax-exempt entities. And why? They're infiltrating elections. They're buying outcomes, whether they're electoral outcomes or legislative outcomes, they're buying them. So tax them onerously, create a revenue stream that actually would fund publicly financed campaigns. And so I think we need to get at the heart of why we don't have bipartisanship in America, get at the heart of why we can't push forward really good legislation like the Violence Against Women's Act in the Senate. It's going nowhere. It's big money behind that. NRA certainly doesn't want that passed. Well, let's nip that in the bud. Thank you.
For me, I have to center the Green New Deal, because honestly, at every door I knock, this is the issue that comes up, is climate crisis. I am people telling me that they are personally worried, but more than that, globally worried of what is the turmoil and the chaos being caused by climate change as a driver. And I hear that, because if we don't have a world that can sustain us and that we can sustain, then none of these other policy issues matter. And I really appreciate the format of the Green New Deal. Honestly, I think it was written by organizers because it is so broad and because it includes a theory of change within it. So the most focus on component, which it should be, is decarbonization by 2030. Of course, transition to renewables by 2035. We don't have a choice in this. We have to do this on this timeline, or things will get monumentally worse and suffering across the globe will be really immeasurable. But the Green New Deal is interesting in that, unlike environmental policies previous to it, it really stakes out the protection that those changes will not fall on the backs of those who are already struggling. Instead, decarbonization, the transition will be just. And the work to not just build solar and wind and renewable energy, but to improve our housing, to make it climate resilient, to improve our public transit will benefit regular people across the country, a carrot. And it's not just those material benefits. What's most important about a Green New Deal is that it also includes a federal jobs guarantee program. Now, we have to get this work done, and we don't trust the oil and gas industries to roll over and just want to decarbonize and turn towards solar or wind. That we know that that's going to take us doing that. And so we commit publicly as a democracy to making that happen. A federal jobs guarantee means that every person who is newly engaged in building the Green New Deal gets a living wage and benefits and has the opportunity to organize on the job and be a part of their union, which will win for the long haul, undercut unemployment, and wages will go up across the board. We change the economy, and we do it by empowering workers and those who want to be employed.
Both of you support Medicare for all, but is that a practical path toward improving healthcare, given that even some Democrats are mixed on it or oppose it, and given that most Republicans, it's a non-starter for them?
So, me again
Yeah.
first? Okay. Yes, I think it is. And I'm going to tell you why. I love talking to Republicans about Medicare for all. Because first of all, most people who that I speak to about healthcare, very few of them know how healthcare is financed presently. And when you're talking about Medicare for all, and you're talking about, like, I know some other Democrats support like a public option and phasing that in, and Elizabeth Warren's plan is public option, executive order, phase in Medicare for all by, I think, the third year of her term. What happened to the Affordable Care Act under one president, President Trump, is that he has destroyed, which was something that was a very, very important piece of legislation. He, by executive order, killed the cost-sharing subsidies. Through tax code, he killed the individual mandate. And he is trying very fervently through the court system to get the entire thing thrown out, and that it's unconstitutional. And I will say, the one thing that the Affordable Care Act that it has that is incredibly important is the component that protects people with pre-existing conditions from discrimination. That truly is what got me in this fight. I have a kid, I call him the walking pre-existing condition. It's my son, he's 23. And I did what any mother would want to do, fight for my son. But when you see what a president can do to a subset of the population by executive order and through pen, he or she could kill healthcare. Another Republican administration comes along, they could kill the Affordable Care Act again. We're back to square zero. If you moved everybody to Medicare for all, you cannot take everybody's healthcare away. You can take a subset away, which Republicans have consistently done, and done it over and over and over again here in Texas, whether it's Medicaid or CHIP or some, waiver funding. The Republican legislators love to kill healthcare for Americans. When you cover everybody, and the children, the 1 million children, or nearly 1 million children here in Texas who need healthcare coverage, you can't take healthcare away from everybody. And the fiscal responsibility of Medicare for all. Let's talk about Medicare in its current iteration. Right now, Medicare. It is paid for with a 2.9% payroll tax, covering the largest risk pool in America, seniors. The highest cost of healthcare, seniors, with a 2.9% payroll tax. And you're going to tell me that it's going to cost a lot more to bring in younger, healthier people into our risk pool? I don't think so. It's just math. The numbers work. And so it will bring us enormous cost savings, and our outcomes will increase incredibly. And so, yes, I think that is the right path. And I would love, love, love to talk to every Republican legislator about it and pull them over to the Medicare for All side.
So when I talk about Medicare for All, the first thing I always say is that I can't wait for Governor Abbott and my mom to be in the same boat, because I think that then he will stop trying to sink it, or at least sink it so fast, which would be a nice change. But when we talk about Medicare for All as a popular political platform, a program for every American, I think we really have to remember that we don't just talk to Republican electeds, Democrat electeds, that we have to talk to those who have voted Republican and Democrat, and that's what I do. And when I talk to folks, I'm not saying to them, are you on the left, are you on the right? Are you blue or are you red? I haven't met a whole lot of people who first and foremost identify as blue or red, but as mother or grandfather or builder, firefighter. And when I ask them their experiences with the healthcare industry as it is right now, people know already in their bones and in their experiences why we are going online to pay our healthcare bills. They know already why it is so scary to go to the doctor not knowing what's going to follow you home. They know why they haven't left the job that they're unhappy with or the spouse that they are unhappy with through whom they get coverage. And so I ask people, regular people, anyone at their door, why do you think things are like that? And they also already know the answer to that, because there's a lot of money in healthcare and health insurance. And then I ask them, what do you think it's going to take to change that? Well, I don't know. I can't do it. I think it's going to take a whole lot to change that. That's right. It's going to take a whole lot. And it's not just going to take moving individual representatives. It's going to take engaging mass numbers of people across the country. And that is what I do. That is what I have done. That is how we were successful with even a good representative like Lloyd Doggett to move him on this issue. It took a lot of people power. And if we replace representatives along the way in cultivating that people power, well, I mean, get on board or go home. We're here for this. The people are here for this, but we can't keep saying, are you a Republican, are you a Democrat, are you left, or are you right? But do you want good health care for your family? And are you willing to put yourself on the line for that? Are you willing to stand up for that? Are you willing to do what it takes to organize around that? I'm not interested in top-downing Medicare for all. I'm interested in cultivating people who will build this from the ground up, something that endures both as a program and as a way of doing politics. And I think that that is where we are right now in January of 2020.
Beyond Medicare for All, both of you support what you mentioned, the Green New Deal, public college, free public college, right?
Was a beneficiary of free public college.
Okay. So a very progressive agenda in a district that was drawn for Republicans, Republican strength, and where a majority of Republicans voted the last time out. How does your progressive agenda, how do you get it to resonate in a Republican stronghold in this election?
You know how you get it to resonate? You go out to where the people are. You don't stay safely in East Austin. You don't stay safely in areas that are turning blue. You go to Hamilton, Texas, and you talk to folks in Hamilton, Texas about these issues, where they are on their front doorsteps. You go to Burleson and talk to people where they are on their doorsteps. You go to Cleburne and Lampasas and Hillsborough and Clifton and Meridian and Killeen. I did that many, many times. In fact, already this cycle, I've put over 10,000 miles on my car going to meet people on their doorsteps where they are. You can win a primary with Travis County. We all know that. We all know the numbers are there. The Democratic numbers are to flip a primary. But the Democratic numbers are not there when you get outside of Travis County. So if you're looking towards strategy for a general election, you have to get outside of the confines of Austin. You have to get outside of the confines of East Austin. You have to get outside of the confines where there is creep from Travis County going into Hays County. And I've done it. And I'll continue to do it. 2 weekends ago, I spent 48 hours on the road, hit 9 counties, empowered people where they are, got them to block walk, empowered them to start their own canvases and phone banks where they live. That is how you do it. And additionally, because we are in such a Republican stronghold, we have to invest in expanding the electorate. And that is what our campaign has done. Our campaign has sent out 6,600 voter registration forms to Democrats who have moved within this district. We identified Democrats who have moved, but have not updated their voter registration. So these are people with a voting history, and we send them a pre-completed voter registration form. Our campaign is the only one that has done that, has worked to expand the electorate. And you have to combine both. You have to go meet people where they are. You have to do coalition building. You have to have a field game. But in this district, you also have to expand the numbers and pull people in who are moving here. And that is exactly what we are doing. And it is exactly why we will win in November.
Field has always been exactly where we knew our focus was, not just for the numbers, but to build something enduring, to meet people where they are, to understand what's happening, to not just have a blue wave, but really strengthen our communities. And so we've knocked 44,000 doors now. I have one paid field staff person. And we do that because when we knock on doors, we're not just asking someone to vote. We're asking them to join us, to be part of something bigger than themselves. We're asking them, what are you already a part of that is bigger than you? How can we know that? How can we support what you are doing and what matters to you? In Hays County, talking to folks who are directly affected by water issues in Texas and asking them, what do you think about things like the Civilian Conservation Corps expansion under the Green New Deal? How would that affect you here? And having them turn me instead to organizing that was already happening in the community, building relationships and lifting up those leaders. Going up to Tarrant County and meeting workers, union workers who were being paid $12 and $13 an hour, who were organizing for their rights and standing with them in that fight, not saying, let me tell you, but let you lead me, and I will be there to have your back. Going to Lampasas and being straightforward with folks, both in Dem Club spaces, which are great, and especially in places like Lampasas, Texas, letting people tell me about their experience with housing and my experience in nonprofit housing and public housing, and how those two are intertwined and how we can meet each other in that space. And then having them tell me, we're going to the square, and everyone goes to the square. Would you like to come? Going to the square and just talking to anyone. Cafeteria workers, moms and dads, teachers, folks from the community, and not being afraid if they are Democrats or Republicans, knowing that they are regular people working just to get by, and that we're going to have a lot more in common than that we're going to have different, as long as I'm willing first to listen and then to show up for somebody. That's how we've knocked 44,000 doors, is that it's not just me. It's these same folks that I try to be as honest with every day, as straightforward with, and to say I'm not going to win this election on my own, and I'm certainly not going to win a Green New Deal on my own, or Medicare for all. We're not going to take down Goldman Sachs and Wells Fargo without you. And it works. And it works. We're really excited to we have a plan to knock 100,000 doors before March 4th. We have a volunteer canvas every day all over the district, self-led, folks we've dropped off lit with. They're ready to rock and roll, and I trust them completely.
Anybody else like to ask a question at this point?
You guys, like, so much of the narrative is often rural versus urban, and rural folks feeling as though people get focused on the urban concerns and that their needs are ignored. So when you go out to those spaces, what are you hearing as their priorities? And I haven't been keeping track of whose turn it is to go first. So.
I'll let you go first because I feel like I've been going first the whole
Sure.
time. So.
Yeah, one of the biggest concerns that I hear is closing rural hospitals. So much so that in addition to starting this campaign fully on board for Medicare for All, I have been investigating policy and really committing myself to the idea that we have to build public hospitals. We can't wait for that to be profitable. We can't wait for that to be safe for the industry. We have to do that. We have to say people everywhere are worth care, and not driving 2 hours for care, but care in their communities. And then the other thing that I hear over and over again, which is why I talk about the Green New Deal the way I talk about it, is jobs and wages, that we are having trouble staying in our communities, like most of us. I know we think about displacement and gentrification in East Austin, but it is awfully hard to stay in the community that you grew up in when there aren't jobs available in that community. And that is a rural issue, actually. But I know, as a farmer, as someone who loves farmers and growers and is very connected to people in the agriculture industry, that there's a whole lot of work to be done on that. There's a whole lot of houses to be rebuilt and maintained in rural areas. And if we can combine those two issues and say, this is a public service, this is a public good, we're here to make sure folks can stay right where they've put their roots down and get paid well for it, suddenly everyone's head turns. A federal jobs guarantee, ending unemployment. These are the watchwords that are in the community right now.
So it depends on which part of the district you're in. I have to be honest. If you are in Burleson, one of their big concerns is mobility and getting from Burleson to Fort Worth. They want transit. They want rapid transit. If you're talking about Marble Falls, theirs is air quality. And having the TCEQ or the EPA come in, there's a rock crushing quarry there that is directly across the street from a hospital. And when you have a lot of seniors moving to an area like Marble Falls, retirees, air quality is incredibly important to them because the silica that they use to crush the rocks is a harmful inhalant. If you're talking about Killeen is one of my favorite places to visit. Many of the people there are military servicemen and women who did their 2 years at Fort Hood, or they're currently committed to somebody or partnering with somebody who's at Fort Hood. And because they, for the most part, have healthcare, really good healthcare, their biggest concern is education. Their schools are terrible there. And one of the first things, so I talked to them about education. One of the first budgets that Betsy DeVos proposed as Secretary of Education was a budget cut to impact aid of about 40%. Impact aid is the federal program that augments property tax dollars that are lost to a large military installation, and Fort Hood is the largest military installation in the United States. And as you can imagine, there's no property tax dollars coming from that installation. So their schools need shoring up. Ultimately, the budget did not get cut by 40%, but it did get cut by 10%. Additionally, since they have so many veterans with disabilities, again, you have depressed property tax values because the veterans get property tax breaks. And like, our roads are horrible, but we can't pay for them. So community development block grants are huge in many of these communities. They want to be able to spend the money how they want to be able to spend them. For veterans, getting their disability claims met in a timely fashion. There are veterans here in Austin that want a VA hospital right here in Austin. We're the 11th largest city in the United States, and yet we do not have a VA hospital. So any veterans who live here in Austin have to go to San Antonio or they have to go to Temple to get their VA needs met. So it depends on where you are, and it's not blanket. And I have met with every hospital administrator in rural Texas, and that is incredibly illuminating. The one in Gatesville is doing really, really well. It's thriving. I don't really understand why, but the others aren't. The one in Hamilton needs some work. So being able to talk to the people where they are about their issues. And I will say, in Bosque County, they just put a resolution, they voted on a resolution to create a healthcare district similar to the one that we have here in Travis County to save their hospital. And it narrowly passed, but they are able to continue keeping their hospital in Bosque County open because they have a property tax. It's a property tax that's much higher than the Travis County property tax. We pay about 10 cents per $100 of valuation. Theirs is 25 cents per $100 of valuation. So, and talking to farmers and ranchers, farmers do not want the federal subsidies. They actually want to sell their produce. They want to sell their goods. And so having the federal government come in and just offer them, subsidies to not sell their produce and their and it's really not produce, it's like sorghum and wheat and corn. Because some of the markets have been diminished under this Trump administration, they don't want the subsidies. So it depends on where you are. Very, very, very different needs, but we're still all tethered together. So it's important to be out in these communities to know what is important to them.
Interesting that impeachment didn't come up in those things. Obviously, hopefully it will be wrapped up by the time one of you maybe takes office. But if you had been in Congress now, I'm curious what your thoughts on, I assume you would have voted with the rest of the Democratic caucus, but what were your thoughts on how the Democrats handled this, the actual articles, the 2 articles that were passed? Was that enough? Did you want to see less, more, do something different? I'm curious how you would have lobbied within the party.
I would have absolutely voted for articles of impeachment. I do think it was prudent not to open it up to everything, but he did. The president absolutely committed impeachable offenses with respect to Ukraine. In my opinion, he should be also held criminally liable for the things that he's done at our borders, and for the intolerance that he has manifested at our borders, and detaining families and children and locking them into conditions that none of us would want to see the worst criminal put into. I think he should be held criminally liable for something like for those offenses. And I think they should have started the impeachment much earlier than when they started it. Personally, I think I would have been with Representative Algreen probably much earlier in the process.
I generally agree. I think that I certainly would have voted for impeachment as well. And there is a laundry list. I think that pointing out the detention centers for immigrants is absolutely correct, and that is the first offense that comes to my mind. I think politically, though, what we saw that I'm very concerned about is setting this up as a main narrative, as focusing so much on impeachment that losing sight of the other political work happening around the country made, I think, a lot of people feel alienated by the process, that this was not something that it felt directly affected them. That while you could be against that level of corruption, while you could be for that transparency, you also have to be for something that takes care of us, the people of this country. And I think that we are struggling to get through that moment, to actually maintain both at the same time, the high level politics and the policies that actually bring people into that space and make sure that they are active, that they are heard, that what they are doing and hearing there has value. And I think we have every opportunity to do both. I don't think that we should be just highlighting one. We have to actually remind ourselves that we are a party on many fronts.
May I follow up to that? I just want to say that taking the oath of office, we take an oath to our Constitution, and representatives have a constitutional imperative to be accountable, to be a check on the administration. And the Congress before the 2018 elected Congress did not do that. And yeah, the impeachment took a lot of time. It took a lot of attention, at least from a media perspective. I know things were still getting done in Congress. There were still things getting worked on and passed. But the reality is we have a constitutional duty to hold this administration and this president accountable. And I commend the people who took the vote and were brave enough to bring articles of impeachment because they upheld their constitutional duty.
Who will you be voting for in the presidential primary?
Heidi, I'm going to let you go first.
Sure. I have supported Bernie Sanders for a very long time.
He's been around a very long time. And you?
To be honest with you, I am still undecided. I have my top 3.
And they are?
I'm not going to reveal. That's my vote. That's my vote. But you know what I will commit to right here and right now? Whoever is the Democratic nominee coming out of this, I will support wholeheartedly without reservation. Because every one of our options on the Democratic side is better than the current option we have right now in President Trump. So I will not be one of those people who sit back if my top 3, none of my top 3 make it onto the next round.
I think that's right. I think we have to support, and then we have to hold any one of their feet to the fire to make sure we stay on track to keep the right wing out of power again. Absolutely.
So, let me ask about guns, which I'm sure in the fall will be a rather divisive issue in this district, where you probably have people on really both extremes of that one, depending on where they live. So what type of gun control reform would you push for? What is your solution to that?
Yeah, so I don't think that folks who have guns, hunt with guns, safely store guns are the problem. I think that the main problems are the NRA and weapons manufacturers who are constantly lobbying our electeds when they should be taxed, who are constantly fanning the flames of hatred when actually they should be held accountable for the harm done by the things that they produce, lawsuits, who are really flooding almost unchecked our markets and our streets with unnecessarily fast and high caliber weaponry, when I think we actually need an assault weapon ban. But here's the thing: you talk about District 25. It can't just be for regular folks not to be able to buy assault weapons. It has to be across the board, and the distribution of assault weapons. So making sure that folks don't feel that their local police or the state, as so many put it, are going to come and unnecessarily outbalance that situation, ending the Pentagon 1033 program. There's a lot of fear. And I think that we also absolutely have to institute background checks. Absolutely have to institute background checks, but I have run so many background checks in my life because of the work that I have done, and I know what shows up there, and it is inherently biased because our criminal justice system forces people to plea, mostly Black and brown individuals, mostly men on that list who have pleaded out. And so while I am for those red flag laws, I also know that we absolutely have to look at how we are addressing that in our justice system. And honestly, like, the greatest indicator of gun violence is or one of the strongest indicators of gun violence is domestic violence history. And domestic violence tends to be a pattern of behavior, right? And so I want to see us first going into domestic violence situations with people who can provide care. We should absolutely disarm those situations. I'm not saying that. I'm saying actually we should send counselors, first aid, mental health providers into those situations, because too many people are afraid to call in domestic violence situations because they know that the only option is for their family to be broken up. And so it's a very two-sided issue. There are the real human struggles, and then there are how those struggles are taken advantage of by the industry who benefits from the continued propagation of fear. And I think we have to do both.
So we once upon a time had an assault weapon ban and a ban on the sale of high-capacity magazines. It expired after 10 years. I would like to see common sense gun safety legislation. Obviously, we live in Texas. There are going to be people who need to protect their homes and their livestock. They will need guns. I had one of the funniest stories in Lampasas where I gave a healthcare town hall, so nothing about guns. There was a guy who came who wanted to ask me before it started what I thought about the Second Amendment. I was like, well, we're going to talk healthcare, but just come on in. We're not going to talk about guns. The final question I was asked was like, Julie, what do you think of it? It was some question about guns. And this set this older gentleman off. It was so funny. And this one woman raises her hand. She goes, I've got 7 guns locked up at my house. There's going to be a problem if somebody comes to take them. And all around the room, these are Democrats. Me too, me too, me too. So in rural Texas, you do have a lot of people with guns. And so I'm not looking to take away anybody's gun, but I am trying to make our community safer. So I think common sense gun safety legislation is paramount in keeping our community safer. Banning, again, high-capacity magazines. I also think that we need to revisit the tax code. So for certain tax-exempt entities that are really spending the majority of their time lobbying Congress and engaging in political activities that have 501c3 status, we need to revoke that tax-exempt status. So we need to put guardrails in the tax code that say if you're going to spend a specific amount of your time, your energy, your money, your resources on political activities, your tax-exempt status will be revoked. That would address something like the NRA that, constantly lobbies, constantly instills fear, has very little to do with their original mission of being a sportsman club. So I will say that I'm proud that I was a Moms Demand Gun Sense candidate in the 2018 cycle. I don't think they've done that yet in the 2020 cycle, but I was very proud of that. And again, the platform is just common sense gun safety legislation. Things that, again, will keep our community safer, limiting the ability of a 19-year-old to go buy an assault weapon and take it to his school and use it. Holding people accountable who don't store guns safely. Holding people accountable who keep guns in their cars, they get stolen. They never report the guns as stolen. I do think we need to register firearms in America. So there are some things that I favor, but again, I've had conversations with people who are gun rights advocates, and you're not going to be able to hear on camera, but I'm doing air quotes. And a guy that I visited in Copperas Cove, because he would not come to a town hall because he thought they were rigged. He said, if you come to my house, we can have a conversation about it. So I did. Drove up to his gate. There was an AR-15 sign on his gate and a no trespassing sign. I called him, I was like, Tony, I don't want to get shot. Is this your house? And he said, yeah, come on in. We had a fantastic conversation about guns and safety and training. Our conversation steered toward training folks. By the end of that conversation, he said, Julie, you know what a really good idea is? And I said, what's that, Tony? And he goes, if people, before they had to buy their first firearm, had to go through extensive training. I was like, Tony, that is a fantastic idea. Can I use that on the trail? And I kid you not, this man texted me the day of the election in November of 2018, and he said, good luck, we're rooting for you. So we don't have to always see eye to eye, but for the majority of people, we can come to some common understanding.
I just didn't know if there's any Roger Williams specific things you want to say about how you would engage or describe him or confront him or campaign against him?
Well, Roger Williams, including today, has already started that America is being assaulted by socialists. And clearly, the progressive policies that Heidi and I stand for, some of them absolutely do involve social programs. And I would love to be able to debate him on which social programs he would like to get rid of. Would it be food safety, air traffic control? Perhaps it's roads. But if he's saying that we should live in a purely capitalist society, which again, he insults the intelligence of his constituents. We are clearly a blended society. I would love to be able to address that with him in a debate. And unfortunately, he seems to not visit District 25 too much, so I'm not sure that we will get that opportunity to do that. And I'm not willing to drive to Weatherford. I'm willing to drive to Burleson and Glen Rose, but I'm not willing to drive to Weatherford outside of District 25 to engage with him.
So you don't consider him an authentic Austinite?
Reserve comment.
I think it's a fascinating opportunity. I am straightforward in the fact that within the big Democratic tent, I am a Democratic socialist, which means that I deeply believe that we deserve to have a voice and a say over all of the economic factors in our lives, from our healthcare to our housing, from our education to our working conditions. That's what that means. And it's really just endlessly entertaining to hear Roger Williams go after socialists or what he perceives to be socialism, because here we have a millionaire car salesman from Fort Worth who inherited his dealership from his daddy. And he likes to say that socialists just want everything for free, which is just fascinating considering who those words are coming from. And so I can't wait to go toe-to-toe with this human being. But even more than that, it is the people who have propped him up. It is Wells Fargo, Goldman Sachs, Lockheed Martin. It is the same folks who lobbied to make sure that vouchers did not have to be accepted across the great state of Texas in our housing industry. It is the folks who write bad mortgages and foreclose on our families. And those folks are not for us. It does not matter when you're talking to someone who has been directly affected or is directly struggling, whether you say the incumbent is this Republican or the incumbent is this Democrat, if you can say, here's how they're funded. Are those folks for you? Absolutely not. I can't wait to stand up as a farmer next to this human and to answer his question. Yes, I identify as a democratic socialist because I believe people should have a say in their lives and not just the heads of corporations and the wealthy elite.
If either of you are elected, you'll represent this district as it's currently constituted for just one term. Then it'll be redrawn. Traditionally, incumbents play a big part up at the Capitol in redrawing those lines. Do you believe next time we come around to elect this district should look grossly different than it does now? And if so, any idea how? Mm-hmm. Is the district ridiculous now?
Yes, I would say that the district is, I affectionately call it the jalapeno heart of Texas, because if you look at it on Wikipedia, it's green and it's definitely the shape of a jalapeno. It is ridiculously drawn. It's 212 miles top to bottom. I've driven that top to bottom twice in one day. It is very, very challenging, and come back to Austin at the end of it. What I want.
You would want it redrawn as a more Democratic district, obviously, if you are the incumbent.
Actually, what I want is us to elect people into the state house that will draw fair lines. I don't care what party they're affiliated with. The people in Texas deserve fair representation.
What's your second favorite thing now that never happened? I mean, it's a political process with people want to win. There's winners
Agreed.
and losers.
But as Heidi has said, there are many times and people can organize, and people are organizing to get fair maps drawn. We absolutely need to continue to lobby to get fair maps drawn. It isn't fair that folks in far east Austin are tethered to people in Hamilton, Texas. It's not fair that they took 3 precincts in Killeen and tethered them to 4 precincts in Tarrant County.
So what should this district look like?
I don't know what it should look like. I don't have a shape. What it needs to be is drawn with respect to avoiding gerrymandering as much as possible. And if that means I'm drawn out of a district or Heidi is drawn out of a district, excellent. Then we've done our job for 2 years. Excellent. But this is not about me any more than it's about Heidi. This is about people in Austin and Hamilton and Burleson and Dallas and Houston and El Paso and everywhere in between having fair districts drawn so that they actually can lobby their own congressman or their own congresswoman for the things that they need in their communities.
As an incumbent, would you not get involved in the
I would
redistricting
not
process?
get involved. No.
Heidi?
I think it's a really interesting question because redistricting on the one hand, as Julie has said, breaks up our ability to access our representatives. It also breaks up our ability to build community, to know our neighbors and to work alongside of them to pursue the things that we want to happen. And on the other hand, ultimately, what we have to do is be able to flip districts that are not drawn for us. We have to be able to reach out and reach what we would consider other and make sure we are building, growing, bringing people in. And so it is, it's not the top issue that I wake up thinking about every morning, certainly, because I mean, that's why we're both in this race, is because we want to flip it. We want to make sure we're taking this wildly gerrymandered thing and representing the whole of it. But I do think that it is important that locally felt issues can be locally represented. That's democratic. And so I think it's important. I also don't have like a shape. I just know that the way things are now, it's not possible for every person in District 25 to be able to come even close to knowing what's going on throughout the district. It takes us a whole lot of traveling, a whole lot of hours, a whole lot of conversations, and really deep listening to be able to do that. And so I think, yeah, it's important. Not my top priority. Would want to see it happen. Absolutely. Think that we have to keep going, even if it doesn't.
I will follow up and say I am actively committed to getting every House Democrat who is running in my district elected. And I've recruited people in Johnson County to run as a House Democrat because the incumbent did not have one last time. And getting folks registered to vote, expanding the electorate, not only helps this race, it helps all the down ballot races as well.
And that's a tough race for a Democrat in Johnson County, I'm sure.
It will be a challenge, yes. But he should not run unopposed.